Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are wrestling with a problem that is, well, it's less about math and more about psychology.
hmm
It's a cognitive glitch so persistent that it frustrates even the most, logical minds.
hmm
We are talking about the infamous Monty Hall problem.
It truly is a perfect storm where human intuition and pure statistical probability just collide head on.
Yeah.
If you ask anyone who hasn't been conditioned by statistics,
Mm.
almost everyone chooses the wrong answer.
Or the answer that feels right.
Exactly. The one that feels right, even though the math says it's completely the other way.
And that feeling, that deep-seated resistance to the correct answer, that's precisely where we're going to start our deep dive today.
Okay.
So let's set the scene for you. It's the classic setup. You're on a game show. There are 3 doors in front of you.
Right.
Behind one is a brand new car. Behind the other 2 are goats.
The classic goats.
And you are asked to choose one door. So you pick door number 1.
So far, simple.
Mm-hmm.
Your chance of winning is 1 in 3.
Right. 1/3. Now comes the twist. The host, who, and this is critical, who knows exactly where the car is.
Yes.
He opens door number 3, revealing a goat. The suspense builds, and then the host turns to you and asks the million-dollar question. Do you want to stick with your initial choice, door number 1, or do you want to switch to door number 2?
And the standard textbook mathematically proven answer is, it's unequivocal.
You should switch.
You should absolutely switch. By switching, your probability of winning actually jumps from 1/3 to 2/3.
But the reality is that the vast majority of people, and I'll include myself in this when I first heard it, we look at the situation. 2 doors left, 1 car, 1 goat, and we instantly declare the past is irrelevant, the odds have reset to 50-50.
Of course, that's what intuition tells you.
That logical mandate to switch, to accept that 2/3 chance, it doesn't just feel complicated, it feels fundamentally wrong, like you're being tricked.
That's the core of the paradox right there. That resistance isn't really a statistical failure. It's a failure of our cognitive model. It stems from a very human, very deep-seated assumption that probability has to, in some way, honor our past commitments.
We treat the universe like a scorekeeper.
Exactly. We assume that the 1/3 choice we made at the beginning is somehow fixed or
Yes.
sacred, and it has to be carried forward into this new reality.
So if the paradox only exists because we treat the universe like a fixed scorekeeper, our mission today is to completely dismantle that assumption.
I like it.
We're going to look at the Monty Hall problem, not as just a math puzzle, but as a kind of diagnostic tool, one that highlights a flaw in our traditional fixed model of reality.
And we're going to do this using a consciousness-inclusive physics framework from our source material called Mott Physics.
Okay.
Because if we shift the focus and introduce the observer your consciousness, not just as a witness, but as an active physical operator within the system, the paradox, it just dissolves.
So it stops being a math trick.
And it starts being an illustration of how reality is fundamentally rendered in the present moment without necessarily honoring the memory of past low-information choices.
Okay, let's unpack this source framework because we're using terms that really do redefine physics itself. Mott Physics. What is it?
It's a model that asserts reality is continuously generated, or the term used is rendered by the observer. It's an ambitious framework for sure. It's trying to address, fragmentation and the missing variable of meaning in conventional physics.
And the foundational concept is Mott.
Right. Mott is presented as the universal law of dynamic balance, and it's meant to replace entropy as the primary driver of physical processes.
Okay, wait, I need to pause on that. Why does it matter that Mott replaces entropy? How does that change our view of the Monty Hall problem?
That's an excellent question, and it's crucial. Entropy suggests a fixed arrow of time pointing toward decay.
Toward disorder, heat, death.
Exactly. And in that fixed historical model, the probability of 1/3 must be carried forward because the past is an objective, undeniable fact. Got it. Ma'at, however, is dynamic balance. It dictates that systems prioritize coherence and adaptive balance in the current moment. So if honoring a fixed, low-information past choice creates imbalance or incoherence in the present system,
Like insisting on a 1/3 chance when there's new information.
precisely.
Right.
If that creates incoherence, the system will naturally trend toward the energetically favorable, balanced path. The path of least resistance.
So the goal of the universe isn't to respect the history of our choice, but to find the most balanced path now.
Precisely. And central to achieving that path is the observer. The symbol for it is O.
Okay.
This is not just a passive witness. The observer, or O, is described as a causal physical operator that actively selects, renders, and integrates reality.
So in the context of Monty Hall, you are the causal operator.
You are.
I see. In classical physics, the observer was basically a problem, right? Like, how do you measure something without disturbing it?
Right.
But here, the observer is the solution. It's the engine that turns potential into experience.
That's it. And this redefinition radically changes our understanding of time. If the observer is constantly rendering reality, time can't be a fixed external axis.
So what is it?
The sources explain that time is an emergent property of sequential rendering. It's a perceptual construct generated by the continuous flow of consciousness integrating new experience.
So when my consciousness flows, the arrow of time points.
You could say that.
So if reality is constantly being re-rendered and updated by consciousness, all towards this dynamic balance, how can a decision I made in a previous render frame like picking door 1 be absolutely binding on the current frame?
That is the core tension we need to explore.
Before we fully commit to this, rendered universe, let's give the classical model its due. Why is the conventional answer switch for 2/3? Why is it so mathematically infallible inside its own fixed framework?
It's purely because of the biased information provided by the host. That's the key. When you initially choose door 1, you absorb 1/3 of the probability. The remaining 2/3 of probability mass is held collectively by doors 2 and 3.
Right, it's out there in the field.
It's in the field. And the host, crucially, does not open a random door. They open a door they know contains a goat. This action is like a surgical removal of a potential outcome.
And because that action isn't random, it funnels the entirety of that collective 2/3 chance, which was originally split between doors 2 and 3. It funnels it all onto the one remaining unopened alternative, door 2.
Correct. The paradox arises because this explanation relies entirely on the history of the system before the door opened, remaining immutably fixed.
It's a burden.
It is. The model compels you, the observer, to carry the burden of that initial low-probability guess, even after you get 100% certainty that another option is invalid.
This reliance on fixed history, where probability is a fixed ledger, it really shows the limitations of what the source calls the old physics. It assumed an objective, observer-free universe. When you treat the probability distribution as an objective ledger that has to maintain that 1/3 split, no matter what new information comes in, you create a psychological contradiction.
And this is where the Masat framework offers a really profound diagnosis. Our sources suggest that the psychological paradox we feel is a clear symptom of a model error in that underlying classic framework.
A model error?
Yeah, it's a contradiction that signals a foundational error, much like how previous physical models ran into mathematical impossibilities.
Okay, let's delve into that idea of model error, because it connects to some fascinating stuff in the source material, specifically about the appearance of negatives in math.
Right.
The sources discuss how historical physics struggled with artifacts like negative probability or negative mass.
Precisely. Classical and early quantum models, when you push them to their limits, would occasionally produce these negative values. And instead of stepping back and saying, wait, how can a physical reality have negative energy or negative mass, which is, nonsensical?
They just invented anti-stuff to explain it.
They did. They postulated anti-stuff or exotic reality to explain the math. Math physics treats those artifacts, negative probability, negative mass, as red flags. They are signals of a model error.
So the existence of a negative number in the foundational math means the underlying assumptions about reality are wrong, not that anti-stuff physically exists.
Exactly. Matt removes negatives from foundational physics and instead defines concepts using what it calls relational polarity.
Okay, relational polarity. Can you give us an example?
Sure. In nature, we don't have energy. We have energy flow, or a relationship between two energetic states, a gradient. Instead of t-time, we have sequential rendering. This insistence on maintaining mathematical consistency without paradox is vital.
And the Monty Hall paradox
is conceptually the same type of model error. It's a contradiction that arises because the current mathematical rule, that fixed 1/3 probability, is trying to describe a physical process, which is consciousness updating reality that it just wasn't designed for.
So the old model's core error in Monty Hall is that it ignores the transformation of the observer. It tries to hold a mathematically subtractive state, that old 1/3 chance, in place.
Perfectly put. The moment the host opens door 3, your information state as the observer changes drastically. The classic model just ignores this.
It asks you to rewind time.
It does. It asks you to mentally rewind to the moment of your initial choice and apply fixed math acting as if the new high-certainty information is irrelevant to the overall probability field.
But the sources tell us that without an observer, reality remains just probability potential.
Right.
So the Monty Hall paradox is the exact moment where the observer's transformation has to be included in the physics for the solution to feel coherent.
Yes, for it to make sense not just mathematically but physically.
Okay, let's step fully across the threshold then. The foundational shift we have to internalize is this. In the Ma'ir framework, probability isn't a memory of the past.
No.
It's a snapshot of the present. It's not a historical ledger. It's a rendered state.
This is where we stop thinking of the universe like a long timeline and start thinking of it like a continuous stream of generated frames. The map field is this infinite pool of unrendered potential.
And because the law is dynamic balance.
The system is constantly seeking the pathways that require the least energy to maintain coherence. The field acts as a kind of probability river of least resistance.
And the flow of that river is what we experience as probability distributions. Let's make this concept of rendering more concrete. How does reality actually come into being? What's the mechanism of this rendering engine?
According to the source material, reality is generated through a three-layer process. The unrendered map field is collapsed into experienced reality. These layers are observation, attention, and meaning.
Observation, attention, and meaning.
Right. The observer operator, the O, uses these inputs to perform the rendering.
So if the wave function, psi is traditionally the probability amplitude, what is it in MAT terms?
In MAT, the wave function is the physical superposition of what's called coherence potential, S, and possibility potential, B.
S and B.
You can think of S structure as the existing defined framework of reality, the constraints.
Okay, like the rules of the game show.
Exactly. And B beauty, or expansion, as the infinite possibilities for change and growth inherent in the field. The two have to be balanced. SB equilibrium.
Okay, so what does wave function collapse mean in this model?
It is the physical act of rendering, the quantum snap. It's performed by the observer operator, the O.
Right.
The observer takes that SB potential, focuses attention on it, and guided by meaning and intention, actualizes a single experienced reality.
So back to the game show. I pick door 1. That's an act of observation and intention, creating a specific probability distribution. 1/3 for my choice, 2/3 for the field.
Yes.
Then the host opens door 3. This is the moment of the snap, a massive input of new, undeniable information into my rendering engine.
Exactly. And this is the crucial point where the MAT framework just diverges completely from the classical model. The system is instantly supplied with new, high-certainty information.
And it's processed by my O.
Yes. And critically, it's saturated with meaning.
And what is meaning in this context? Is it just my interpretation?
No, it's more than that. Meaning, symbolized by W, is formalized in the source material as a causal physical variable. It's not just subjective. It's a physical force that weights probability distributions.
So meaning can bias the universe.
It biases the universe toward purposeful events. When the host opens door 3, the meaning is 100% certainty. This path is closed.
So if meaning is a physical weight, then the revelation of the goat in door 3 acts like an immense gravitational pull on the probability field. It instantly recalculates the whole landscape.
Precisely. The O is forced to integrate this new, coherent piece of meaning. The previous distribution of 1/3, 2/3, which relied on the possibility of door 3 holding the car, is instantly rendered obsolete. The system has to rebalance.
To maximize what?
To maximize probability, intention, and coherence of meaning. All three.
So if the universe seeks maximum coherence, then honoring the memory of my initial low information choice, the 1/3 that actually creates incoherence now.
It does. Because the present reality has definitively narrowed the options. The system will naturally favor the path of highest present coherence.
Which is switching to the door that now collectively holds all the remaining possibility.
That's the resolution. The final rendering equation in the source material confirms it. A reality is rendered when it maximizes all three factors. The memory of the past choice cannot possibly carry the same weight it did before the snap, because the ingredients, specifically the variable of meaning, just changed drastically.
The universe stops caring about the initial 1/3 the instant the host provides 100% certainty about the goat.
Yes. The paradox is solved not by complex historical math, but by the physical requirement of the universe to maintain coherence and balance in the present rendered state.
Okay, now we have to address the most difficult part for the human mind to accept, I think.
Time and identity.
Time and identity. We assume this fixed linear trajectory, which makes us believe that the you who chose door 1 is the exact same person who is making the choice now.
And the Mosh framework challenges this by redefining the fourth dimension. It's not time itself.
What is it then?
It's the axis along which consciousness moves by rendering sequential reality states.
Wow.
Time is purely a perceptual construct. It results from the sequential rendering of experience. We perceive linearity because our consciousness flows coherently, integrating frame after frame. But this means that the past, it's not fixed history.
Wait, if the past isn't fixed history, doesn't that violate causality? How do we maintain a coherent memory if the archive is always changing?
That's a fundamental and necessary question. The sources address this by describing the past as a rendered archive that is continuously re-rendered based on new integration.
So memory isn't data storage.
It's not. It's a story we continuously rewrite. The past's structure and meaning are updated when consciousness evolves and integrates new information.
That is mind-bending. The implications for the observer in the Monty Hall problem are enormous.
Well, it's
really delineate the two observers here.
Okay, so we have O-past, the person who chose door 1, based on 1/3 probability and no other information.
Right. Me 1 minute ago.
Then, the host opens door 3. That performs the rendering of a new reality frame. Now we have O-present, who exists in a world where door 3 is definitively open and irrelevant.
So those two yous are not physically identical frames of consciousness.
They are not. The sources state that the continuity of identity is the rendering substrate of time itself. Your sense of self provides the structural coherence, the S necessary for the timeline to form.
Right.
But the O-present has fundamentally different information, a completely updated coherence potential than O-past. The previous self's information state is fundamentally different from the current self state.
I chose door 1, but that version of me is gone, rendered obsolete by the arrival of new information.
Exactly.
So the initial 1/3 probability sticks to the past self, but that self no longer holds the reins of the system.
That's the clean break. What carries over into the new frame is awareness, not historical probability. Your awareness is updated. The probability field is then recalculated from the current awareness state.
So the inertia of the paradox is just the feeling that I'm obligated to carry the historical weight of that 1/3 probability into my present decision.
Yes, that's it entirely. But if we accept the Mach premise, the doors are not bound to your previous state. Only your perception, your memory, is bound to the history of that choice.
The paradox insists that I honor the commitment of a state that no longer exists.
A state whose physical reality has been fundamentally altered by the host's action. O-present, the you standing there now with the open door 3, has no logical or physical obligation to honor the commitments or the low information assumptions of the version of you who existed one render frame earlier.
This moves the decision from mathematics back to pure choice. Switching or staying is no longer about blindly adhering to a mathematical rule from the past.
No.
It's about who you are now in the newly rendered frame, exercising freedom based on the highest available coherence.
And that freedom is key. The law of choice in the sources establishes that freedom is the ability to bias probability fields without violating Mott.
So if staying with door 1 is a low coherence, low probability path,
Then the highest act of choice is to utilize the new information to find the path of highest coherence, which is switching to door 2.
the universe does not keep score. The inertia comes entirely from our own identity, refusing to acknowledge that the past self is gone and that the new information gives us a completely new starting point.
You got it.
This is where the physics concept becomes, profoundly practical.
Hmm.
If the Monty Hall problem is resolved by realizing that the present self is absolved of the commitments of the past self, then the MHP is essentially a profound metaphor for psychological inertia, for the sunk cost fallacy on a cosmic scale.
It illustrates how powerfully we hold ourselves hostage to old commitments, old identities, and old assumptions that belong to a previous, lower information version of ourselves.
It's so true.
The mental anguish in Monty Hall isn't really confusion over conditional probability. It's the psychological pain of abandoning a sunk cost.
Which is your initial selection of door 1.
Exactly.
I think we've all been trapped in that scenario, where the ghost of the past self is making our decisions. Let's use the career analogy the sources suggest.
Yep.
Staying in a job or a career path long after the joy or utility is gone, simply because, well, I already invested 10 years of my life and money into this degree, so I have to continue down this track.
That is precisely the O-past imposing its will on the O-present. You are forcing your current, updated consciousness, which has new meaning, new information, new capabilities, to adhere to the projection of the version of yourself that existed 10 years ago. It was a huge energetic imbalance.
And the Moffat framework would interpret that not as dedication, but as a scaling mismatch. Like my
Mhm.
personal growth layer is evolving at one rate, but my historical commitment layer is stuck, creating friction.
Exactly. Or think about a relationship analogy. Staying in a relationship that has demonstrably run its course purely because I made a commitment once and I shouldn't quit now after all that time.
But that commitment was made by a specific frame of consciousness under a specific set of S and B potentials.
Right. And that commitment frame has since been rendered obsolete by new information, new realities, new meaning.
So by forcing myself to adhere to that old commitment, I'm actually violating my own need for coherence now.
Yes. You're violating the fractal self's need for identity coherence across new dimensions and states. You're prioritizing historical memory over present coherence. And this is where the deeper implication of MAT comes in. For the system to remain stable, the observer has to prioritize the highest degree of coherence.
So forcing myself to stick to a past imbalanced commitment actually violates my present coherence.
It does. It leads to unnecessary energy expenditure and friction. The universe is telling you, that door is open, it's a goat. Now choose based on the remaining potential.
What's fascinating is how this re-rendering idea applies to the deep process of healing and trauma, which is also addressed in the source material.
Mhm.
If memory is not fixed data, but a story we continuously rewrite, how does the My Hot lens view healing?
Healing is fundamentally an act of re-rendering.
Yeah.
Trauma, in this view, leaves fragments of memory or identity that are, out of phase or incoherent with the current observer's state.
Okay.
Healing happens when these fragments regain safe coupling and coherent phase alignment with the present self. This is effectively rewriting the meaning and the structure of the trauma into understanding, but without deletion.
The past changes when we do.
That's the line from the source, yes. The past changes when we do.
That is powerful. It means the initial low information choice, the painful one, the costly one, it doesn't have to define the outcome.
Not at all.
The moment the host opens the door and shows you the goat, the math paradox disappears because the psychological and physical obligation to that initial choice, it vanishes.
The ethical clarity becomes simple, and it's informed by the physics. Your past choice does not define your present reality. The commitment was to the highest possible coherence available then. Now, you have new information and a new opportunity to choose the path of highest coherence now.
It puts the burden of responsibility back on the present self to use new information, rather than honoring a blind loyalty to an old choice.
Absolutely. The choice to switch or stay should be made by the version of you standing there now, operating with maximal awareness and coherent information, not the version that existed before the information was revealed. That's the core message of the Monty Hall illusion when you look at it through the lens of rendering physics.
Okay, let's wrap up this deep dive. We started with a notorious math puzzle that felt impossible because our intuition insisted that probability must act as a fixed ledger.
That keeps score of our commitments.
Right.
And we concluded that the impossibility was a cognitive flaw, a faulty axiom in the traditional model that assumes history is fixed and untouchable.
And when reality is viewed as a continuously rendered state driven toward dynamic balance, toward Ma'at, the paradox just dissolves.
It does. The moment the host opens door 3, it's a quantum snap that resets the entire field for the observer. The new self standing there is under no physical or psychological obligation to honor the initial low information choice.
So the choice to switch suddenly becomes the highest expression of using present coherent information.
The universe does not keep score of your past self's choices. It simply renders the present state, maximizing coherence in the now. That two-thirds probability isn't a historical artifact. It's the instantaneous rebalancing of potential in the current frame.
So we want to offer you this final invitation to apply this idea of the transformed observer to your own life.
Yeah.
The person who chose the first door is gone. You are the person standing in front of new information.
So in your own life, what door has already been opened for you? What clear goat has been revealed that you are still ignoring out of loyalty to a commitment, an identity, or an assumption made by a previous version of yourself?
The physics of Ma'at gives you permission to reset. Switch or stay, either one is valid, but let this version of you choose. Do not let loyalty to a ghost of your past self dictate the path of your coherent present reality.